Hi there, I'm Adi Sharma. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite composers of classical piano. So I have been playing the piano for over 8 years now. And, with all that time playing, you listen to so many hours of classical music. And that really amounts to a point where I'm able to determine what composers are my favorite and, what in different ways how they really inspire me. And they really are just the teachers of the past. And so today I thought I'd share with you these 4 composers who are just geniuses, such masters in composition and the piano. I hope you enjoy. Firstly, I want to talk about Ludwig van Beethoven, arguably one of the most popular composers to ever live, maybe besides Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So Beethoven composed during the classical era, and he lived from 1770 to 1827, composing some of the best works ever written for the piano repertoire. One of the reasons I really love Beethoven is his uniqueness, in the sense that the classical era had such a different archetype of music than what Beethoven was composing. Like, his style was just so different from composers like Haydn or Clementi, Mozart. And what really made him stand out was his knowledge, his emotional depth, and his heart. He just poured his heart into all of his pieces and all of his works, and it was so impressive to see, everything that he encompassed in a single work. His talent in both composing and playing was discovered at a very early age, and his time of composing can be divided up into 3 different periods. And these periods are really important as they define his maturity and sense of music at each time. And they also show how his music and composing changed, with his decline in health, both physically and mentally, his struggles in life, his emotional conflicts. And, this all encompassed into changing Beethoven as a composer, as he went to write his more mature sonatas or his later concertos or symphonies. They're so different from his earlier works, and I think that distinguishment is what gives Beethoven so many different layers, so much depth as a composer, and I think that's really important in what, characterizes him as such an amazing pianist. The 32 Beethoven sonatas are maybe some of the best works ever composed, not just by him, but ever by any pianist, because they just require so much musical control, endurance, emotional expense, and technical ability as well. A lot of them are really, really difficult. So the first time I heard all 32, I was listening to them while doing another task, but the one that really caught my attention, that I listened the entire thing to, was number 23, the Appasionata. I was completely blown away by the sonata, and the rendition I heard too was just so amazing. Daniil Barenboim is one of my favorite Beethoven interpreters. And when I heard the Appasionata, as I was listening to a set of them by Barenboim, I was just blown away by those magical 23 minutes. And there's something I find so enticing about this work. I mean, Appasionata literally translates to passion in Italian. And I think passion is what really defines this entire sonata. I mean, there's so many different characteristics. The first movement is absolutely beautiful. I mean, I think he chose F minor as, the best key possible for this, because F minor is such a complex minor key. And then every time he modulates to, the relative major per se, A flat major, there's such a beautiful change in tone. The melody is so contrasting, yet they create this musical synergy, which is just unfathomable. I mean, I can't even describe the feelings you get from listening to some of the parts in the first movement, the second movement, and especially that enraged, that ferocious third movement of the Appasionata. It's absolutely mesmerizing. Beethoven's works are just superb. I mean, his composing style is so well thought out, and his modulation is immaculate. I mean, it's up there with Chopin, Prokofiev, Tchaikovsky. He's a prime example of creativity and musical knowledge as well, both working hand in hand to create such amazing works of art. Even with all that tragedy in his life, his deafness, his distancing from, social settings, and the immense sadness he faced throughout his life, it's hard to realize that he actually did compose so many great works. The concertos, his amazing symphonies, his sonatas, as I said, and so much more. And so I think Beethoven will definitely be revered and admired for centuries to come. The next composer on this list is the amazing pianist Sergei Rachmaninoff. Rachmaninoff was born in 1873 and composed in the late Romantic period until he passed away in 1943. And his works are so admired, so respected worldwide. He is definitely one of the greatest virtuosos to ever live, along with many other Russian composers, actually. There's so many that have come out from that country. Sergei Prokofiev, Dmitri Shostakovich, Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, Igor Stravinsky, Nikolai Medtner. I mean, there's so many amazing pianists, and I think Rachmaninoff really shines out of that enormous list, purely because of his extremely unique style of composing. So I fell in love with his music about a year and a half ago, and no, it's not because he and I share the same birthday. That's definitely not the reason. I mean, it might be. But it's definitely because of his amazing style of including not only a heavy amount of emotional depth in his music, but also this technical complexity which really balances out and gives this amazing contrast to create such magical music, so many magical pieces. And his music has almost a sorrowful beauty to it. It's really, really impressive. And you can see that with the sort of story arcs he creates for a lot of his pieces. There's a resounding emotion you feel throughout the entire piece, and I think that's a really, really admired characteristic of his composing style. So Rachmaninoff's orchestral works for the piano and orchestra are really what made me fall in love with his music. I mean, he only wrote 5, which is, hard to think. I wish he had written more, because they're just genius. They're so incredibly beautiful. And he wrote his 4 piano concertos, and then Rhapsody on a theme of Paganini, which is such an incredible work. I mean, definitely one of the best, variations on the work of Nikolai Paganini. I mean, there's the Brahms, there's Liszt's works that are on a theme of Paganini, and then there's Rachmaninoff's, which I think are definitely some of the most impressive. But my absolute favorite concerto by him is the second piano concerto in C minor. The story behind it is absolutely amazing as well. In 1893, Tchaikovsky died, and this caused Rachmaninoff to fall into this intense creative decline. His music was dwindling, his composing was getting, not as impressive as it was before. I don't want to say worse. But he really started to face struggle emotionally. And after the failure of his first symphony in 1897, this depression only got worse. After suffering through almost 4 years of depression, Rachmaninoff finally started to undergo these intense forms of therapy with his friend and amateur psychiatrist, Nikolai Dahl. And this led to Rachmaninoff finally gathering the enthusiasm, the happiness, the inspiration to compose again. And finally, in 1901, he premiered the second piano concerto dedicated to Nikolai Dahl. this work is really what made me fall in love with Rachmaninoff. It's every time I listen to it, there's just chills that go down my spine. It's so amazing to listen. And Rachmaninoff's music, just like his second piano concerto, all of it is so immersive. And I think that's why he's really one of the most respected and one of the best pianists of all time. The next composer I want to talk about is Franz Liszt, another fantastic virtuoso. I have used that word so many times now, I can't even imagine. There are so many virtuosos, though, and he's no doubt an amazing pianist, an excellent pianist for so many different reasons, and an amazing composer as well. His technical proficiency is it's off the charts. I mean, you can't compare him. He's so amazing, and it's said even he sold his soul to the devil to write some of his music, which is just an such a far-fetched analogy, but I think so fitting as well. So that's why he really is one of my favorite composers. Liszt was a Hungarian composer who was born in 1811 and passed away in 1886, and he was taught by Karl Czerny, who is actually a pupil of Beethoven, which is why Liszt developed a really good proficiency in the piano at a very young age. So I was first introduced to Liszt's music about 4 years ago, and this was with the introduction to his Grande Étude de Paganini, which are a set of 6 etudes based on the pieces of violin by Niccolo Paganini, who was a amazing violinist, one of the greatest of all time. And the Grande Étude de Paganini are some of the most difficult, most challenging etudes ever written for the piano repertoire. I mean, they require such technical demand. And the first piece I ever listened to, from that set was the third one, probably one of his most popular pieces, La Campanella, Etude in G sharp minor. And the performance I heard was really a magical one. The interpretation is still one of my favorites. It was Evgeny Kissin's interpretation at Royal Albert Hall when he debuted at the BBC Proms in the 1990s and gave a 1 hour encore, which is absolutely crazy to think. I mean, the audience just kept applauding him to come back and play more and more and more. And I'm so happy that he did, because we would have never gotten to hear one of the best interpretations of La Campanella by Evgeny Kissin. Kissin's performance is so many wonderful things. It's delicate, it's expressive, the light touch is, so well executed. It's just a flawless performance. Even all those tumultuous passages, all that phrasing, it's done just so well. And I think he also showcases Liszt's composing ability and Liszt's genius. It's such a creative piece. It's influenced by other musicians, but Liszt also puts his own spin on it. And I think that's one of his greatest abilities as both a performer and a composer. His complex melodies just, overlay in such a way that they create this beautiful flow of music. And it's apparent in, not only his difficult pieces, but a lot of his romantic pieces as well, such as Liebestrom number 3, which is also one of my favorites. He always manages to mix beauty with this vicious, almost aggressive tone, and I think this is especially prevalent in his set of 12 etudes, the Transcendental Etudes. My favorite performance of the Transcendental Etudes are by Daniil Trifonov, who performed them in Lyon, France. And I think the highlights are number 1, Preludio, Mazeppa, which is number 4, Feu Follet, which is number 5, Wildejagd, which is number 8, and Appasionata, number 10. I think this is such a wonderful performance, really one of the greatest. And you can't praise Liszt without talking about his famous set of Hungarian Rhapsodies, those 19 amazing pieces that are just mind-blowing in so many ways. The Rhapsodies are really just a work of art, and definitely my favorites would be number 2 and number 6, which are just more examples of Liszt's legendary composing. Franz Liszt really is one of the greatest pianists to ever live. He had such a superior musical knowledge and such an amazing ability to compose these works of art, really. He is such an interesting and talented person. I mean, if he was human. And finally, I want to talk about Frédéric Chopin, who is, in my opinion, the greatest pianist and composer to ever live. I mean, that's why I'm filming it in the room where my grand piano is. He is the biggest inspiration for me for piano, and really the king of this beautiful instrument. Chopin was born in 1810 in a small town just outside of Warsaw, Zelazowa Wola. That's quite a mouthful. And he eventually moved with his family to Warsaw just a few years later. At the age of 21, he moved to Paris. His first choice was Italy, but there were many violent unrests there, and so he chose Paris, where he would spend the remainder of his life and compose some of his greatest works. His first ballade is extremely special to me. And, there's many reasons for that, but I think the main reason is it encompasses just the best of what Chopin wrote. There's so many different elements to it, so many different aspects that he includes. There's Étude-like passages, nocturne-like phrasing, waltz-like elements, this sort of concerto-like grandness in many pieces, in many passages. And he just conveys so much. It's really indescribable. Everything from the opening, that first big booming C in both the left hand and the right hand, just sets the tone for the entire piece. It shows that Chopin can be so simple yet so powerful at the same time, and I think that's one of his greatest strengths as a composer. My favorite rendition of the first ballade is definitely Krystian Zimmerman, who is one of the greatest Chopin interpreters, probably my favorite. I don't know, I listen to so much Chopin that you hear so many different pianists, it's hard to decide, but Krystian Zimmerman is just a masterful pianist. And his first ballade really encompasses what Chopin is, what his music is, the lyricism. It's a work of art that is indescribable, unmatched by pieces that have been composed. And I think that's what makes Chopin's music so outstanding. I also love Chopin's outstanding piano concertos. He only wrote 2, the first one in E minor, opus 11, and the second one in F minor, opus 21. But in my opinion, they're the best concertos ever. I mean, I'm an amateur sort of listener at this point. I am no Krystian Zimmerman or Martha Argerich or Seong Jin-Cho even. But those concertos invoke so much in me, especially because they're so complex. Each movement can be broken down into so many different elements. And I think he encompasses, again, so many different aspects of music at the time while putting his own, twist on it and including so much creativity. It's really just immaculate. The first piano concerto has one of the best piano entrances, I think, of any concerto. It's this booming E minor chord and just octaves, and then a small little resolution at the top that fades, and then another booming A chord. And this continues throughout the first movement, which is just so vibrant. It's playful at points, it's extremely beautiful, and sort of slow at some points, and ends in this beautiful coda. I mean, Chopin really does write some of the best codas. Ballade number 1 is an example of that, and the first movement of the Chopin Piano Concerto is also an example of that. The second movement is somehow even more beautiful than I think some of his best nocturnes. Larghetto is, I think, the best tempo to choose, and Romance really does describe, the second movement. There is so much going on, these harmonies colliding together to create such a singular flow of music. It's really impressive how the orchestra and the piano, parts don't ever dominate one another. They, play in harmony. And I think that's one of Chopin's best aspects of his concerto writing. The orchestra and the piano just always have this amazing synergy. It's amazing to listen to, no matter how many times you do. The third movement is exactly what the title describes, rondo vivace. Rondo is the repeat of, sections of the music, and vivace is lively and brisk, and that's exactly what Chopin does here. There's this vivacious tone to the third movement, and there's seamless modulating between E minor and E major, and other different keys throughout, with these beautiful sections of arpeggios, high octave parts that are, immensely well composed. And the ending is, though simple, I think really fitting to what this music is and the Polish influence that Chopin took, especially for the third movement. The second concerto is, I think, on par with the first. I mean, there are so many different, passages that have just depth, balance of, as I said, the piano and the orchestra, and he uses the tones of F minor very, very well. There's intricate phrasing that's needed, and the overall musicality of the piece is immaculate, to say the least. Maestoso is an amazing first movement with another amazing piano entrance. It's so bold, so big, so powerful, and I love that Chopin did that for both his piano concertos, and chose Maestoso as a leading factor of his first two. I mean, the first movement of the E minor concerto is, as I said, Allegro Maestoso, and this is just Maestoso. Then we go into another slow and very, very beautiful second movement at Larghetto, and finally Allegro Vivace as the third movement, another beautiful choice for tempo, and really displaying how powerful the key of F minor is. As I said for Beethoven's Appasionata Sonata, F minor is a really, really interesting key because it can be used in so many different ways. And I think Chopin does that extremely well with the F minor concerto. It's beautifully composed, there's intricate development everywhere, and it's an overall amazing, amazing concerto. Definitely one of the best ever written. Chopin's music is colorful, it's passionate, it's deep, and so beautiful. There has really been no other composer that has been able to match the essence that Chopin's music really brings, and the types of emotions that arise in me when I listen to any piece by him. He really is such a legendary composer, and I'm sure his legacy will live on for eternity. Thank you very much for listening and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I will leave all the links to the performances in the description below, so make sure to check them out. There are some amazing pianists and some amazing performances. Definitely my favorite. Thank you very much once again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.